Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video. And in today's video, I want to take a moment to talk about last week's quote-unquote news leaks surrounding content that may be coming to the game in the upcoming Last Stand DLC. I appreciate this is about a week late, but I was on holiday in Japan last week, so I wasn't able to cover it when it first went live, but it is information that is interesting and important, so I still want to talk about it. It is however worth mentioning that this information was data mined, which of course comes with the usual disclaimer that all of this stuff should be taken with a pinch of salt until it is officially confirmed. However, paired with the direction that we know Massive are taking with the 1.6 update and their attempt to provide us with a truly balanced PvP experience, then this seems more plausible than some of the more wild posts that we've seen in the past. Also, credit for the data mine information goes to Reddit user IamUnknown. I will of course link the original post down below. There is a lot of text, so to make it a little bit more manageable, then let's break it down as follows. Here are 3 new features coming to the Division in patch 1.6 and Last Stand. Possibly, probably, maybe, whatever. First up, in at number 3, Dark Zone leaderboards. This one is actually already confirmed. We know this from one of the last State of the Games from the end of last year. And of course, knowing that these are confirmed does give a little bit more credibility to this data mine information. But what's interesting is that the additional information it provides actually sheds more light on how exactly these leaderboards will function. The data mined info is basically a collection of text and voice lines depending on the activity, and in the case of Dark Zone leaderboards, they make reference to tiers 1, 2 and 3. We know from the state of the game at the end of last year that placement on the DZ leaderboards would result in rewards, but exactly how was still a bit of a mystery. But the notion of grouping people into tiers makes it sound like the rewards will be much broader and more generous. Grouping people into one of 3 categories, each of which will more than likely have increasingly better rewards. So that would then more than likely mean if you simply participate in Dark Zone activities, then even if you don't hit the top, you will still likely be rewarded for your participation. That's also encouraging to hear because one of the things that did crop up when they did announce DZ leaderboards was the kind of concern for hackers, especially on PC. They thought, well, you know what, if you're going to be rewarded for being number 1 on the Dark Zone leaderboard, surely the hackers will just find a way to get to the top. This isn't really a concern because partly if they hack their way to the top, then it'll be a lot easier to identify them, but also because if they're grouping people into tiers, then you're probably not going to be aiming for number 1, you're probably just going to be aiming for a tier. Think of it kind of like a ranking, maybe something like Overwatch hitting like diamond, gold, bronze, whatever. Something like that is more than likely how the rewards will be distributed. The data mine info also reveals that rewards will be obtained from the rewards claim vendor, that is the dude at the back of the base operations. And for anyone looking to check their progress throughout the week, perhaps you're chasing tier 1, then you'll be able to interact with a laptop that will be placed inside each of the Dark Zone checkpoints to find out more details. It also sounds like, again based on these text files, that the leaderboards will refresh on a 24-hour cycle and not in real time. So for anyone looking to track their progress, you would simply need to participate in events in the Dark Zone that day, and then check back the following day. Truth be told, I'm not entirely sure about that last one because a 24-hour refresh on a leaderboard sounds a little bit janky, especially if you're one of those people that is trying to kind of track your progress. Maybe there's merit behind it because of course it'll allow them to filter out any kind of red herrings or any rogues before kind of updating the leaderboards, or more than likely it's just outdated information. Regardless, I'd still take that with a pinch of salt right now. But with that out of the way, let's now turn our attention to something that we don't know, something new, something people have been asking for quite some time. PvP game modes. I am well aware that right now there is a fierce, passionate debate among the community with regards to the direction they want to see the game go. This is of course further amplified by the fact that the 2nd Elite Task Force are right now on their way to Redstorm to help shape the future of PvP in the game. And while I appreciate many people have long been asking for something like a PvE Dark Zone, if I'm completely honest, I feel like that's not something we're ever going to get. Despite the fact that the Dark Zone creates a very obvious divide among players, it is also an environment that Massive have created and something they're unlikely to undo in such a manner. Their solution to this, however, will more than likely come in the form of PvP game modes, a place for people that want genuine dedicated PvP to go, in turn potentially removing some of the heat on players that just want to farm in the Dark Zone. Whatever the reason or the motives, if this data mine information is anything to go by, it sounds like we might just see that in Last Stand. The information contains various text and voice lines that call out timed events such as at the halfway point, 1 minute remaining, 30 seconds remaining. There are of course numerous permutations of each of these because of course they want to provide vocal variety, but they all hint at the same thing. Game modes that have an overarching timer. Furthermore, there are lines that reference zones being controlled and captured, things like Zone Alpha is now neutral, Zone Alpha is in enemy hands, and Alpha is now under friendly control, etc. Again with various permutations. This of course sounds remarkably like Control or Capture style game modes where there are typically say 3 flags, A, B and C or Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, scattered around the map and teams have to hold them in order to score points. And there is of course an overarching timer and the team with the most points at the end wins, or alternatively if you hit the kind of point milestone during the game then it'll end prematurely. Now of course in order to apply this to the Division, I imagine we'd be looking at some sort of dedicated playlist, kind of like how Survival, you select it from a mode, you then dive into it, and of course a set of bespoke maps, because to play something like Control in the entire Dark Zone would be frankly ridiculous. The player limit on the Dark Zone just wouldn't support these sort of modes and engagements across a large scale map, so for this to work they'd have to create some bespoke arenas. Either way, however they decide to do it, assuming of course that this is even true, then PvP game modes would certainly give players that want a PvP experience somewhere to truly test their skill. It would also explain why there is such a big focus on PvP in patch 1.6. If this does happen, however, I would personally like to see some sort of pre-made loadout system, a means for people to load into a playlist and pick from a pre-made set of gear and weapons so as to ensure that encounters are actually balanced. Not necessarily every single game mode, perhaps they could offer a restricted and an unrestricted playlist, one of which would then allow you to use your gear that you've earned and you spent time min-maxing and building, meanwhile the other one will provide you with loadouts, or perhaps a kind of normalised gear model. Either way, something to think about. Then finally, the last one is Contamination Events. These are supposedly Dark Zone events that take place underground, similar in nature to supply drops in that they are timely and they will draw people to a central location. Only this time, as mentioned, they take place underground, in the tunnels, and the contamination levels gradually rise to quote-unquote deadly levels. This in turn draws heavy name cleaner bosses to come and burn out the contamination, which of course means that you be in tight underground spaces with big ass cleaners closing in. It'll be interesting to see whether the contamination reaching deadly levels actually has a gameplay impact in that it, say, becomes too much for you to handle and you can't be there too long, kind of like how when you first ever entered the Dark Zone when you were leveling your character and you didn't have enough filters. Or alternatively, whether the deadly levels is just a narrative hook to explain the reason the cleaners are closing in. Either way, more events like this in the Dark Zone will be cool, supply drops were a great addition to the game, so more stuff like that can only be a good thing. And that, my friends, is pretty much it. As mentioned, all of this is based on data mined information, so don't take it as gospel. In fact, take it with a huge grain of salt, but if it does come to pass, then there could be some pretty cool stuff coming to the game. Let me know down below what you guys think of all of this, and also if we do get a PvP game modes, what other modes would you like to see besides Control? I would personally love to see a Capture the Flag mode where you physically have to take and escort the flag to your base. That could be super awesome in this game. But either way, let me know your thoughts, but for the time being, thank you for watching, take it easy, and I'll catch you in the next one.